You know, those life-changing moments that jolt you out of your imposed hypnotic state of selfish perception? They jolt your core, allowing your spiritual self to connect with everything beyond. Except for love. You grasp the insignificance of everything for an infinite number of seconds. So, allow me to tell you a story. My experience is accurate. It is not easy for me to share this so openly. In truth, very few people are aware of the most profound event I recently had. I kept it to myself for a while, too afraid to tell anyone. I needed time to process the significance and wrap my mind around the experience. Furthermore, there's the dread of disclosing it to others. How will they react? How will I be evaluated? Will anyone ever trust me? The reaction from the few people I've gradually told has given me the confidence to overcome those obstacles. Their reactions have shown me that even a personal experience can have a ripple impact on the lives of others. That some stories, no matter how difficult, must be told. I am now prepared. I hope you are as well. Here is my story. Nothing disturbs a family more than an illness. A year ago, I began experiencing some very troubling symptoms. I wasn't concerned at first because I was a young, relatively healthy female. Until then, all of my medical tests had come back negative, and my symptoms had gotten worse. My doctors and I began at the bottom and worked our way up the ladder of every possibility, but we were unsuccessful. There was no test that indicated an issue, no drug that helped, and even small surgical treatments did not solve my difficulties. Stress would not be a sufficient term to describe my sentiments after months of not knowing what was wrong with me. In more ways than one, my life was turned upside down. Not to mention the fact that several of those months were marred by unrelated personal heartbreaks. Things were not going well. I had to be strong and smile as much as possible. I had to be tough, even though my own husband could not look at me in the eyes without crying, because he was afraid of losing me. During those long months, I appreciated every simple joyous moment. A hysterectomy was reluctantly recommended as a cure for the problems. Surgery would also provide my surgeon with a greater understanding of what was going on inside of me, as well as possible answers. We booked the hysterectomy and braced ourselves for a long but promising recovery. I was not afraid of the surgery. It wasn't my first major surgery. I was aware of the dangers. I knew there would be suffering. I knew it would be difficult, not only for me, but also my family. So in mid-May of this year, I had a total abdominal hysterectomy. I got to save my ovaries, but one had to be biopsied, and a second static surgery as usual. After that, I felt quite comfortable, if you can call being struck by a bus comfortable. I had a morphine drip that could push every 30 minutes. My midsection was bandaged, and a very beautiful drain tube came out of my stomach when I was resting in the hospital. Everything went just as I imagined, and I kept my positive attitude. We were relieved to hear that the test findings from my uterine and ovarian biopsy were negative. Everything appeared to be fine. I was freed after only 2 nights, eager to recover at home and regain my health, restore my life. That, however, was not the case. My pain began to worsen just a few hours after I arrived home, but nothing caught me off guard. I took a couple of Percocets and chalked it up to post-surgical discomfort. I have a high pain tolerance that has been tested several times, so I sat in the comfortable recliner that my husband had moved into our bedroom and attempted to sleep it off. Nope. By midnight, I was in the fetal position on the floor of our bedroom, wailing. The agony was unbearable. It seemed as if someone had ripped open my stomach with their fingers, extracted my organs and intestines, placed them in a blender, blended them on low power, poured gasoline on them, and then set them ablaze before reintroducing them to me. That doesn't completely describe it, but it's the best I can do. It is something I would never want on anyone or anything. Sawyer, my husband, hurried me to the hospital. The physically excruciating anguish was so acute that nothing else in the world mattered to me but putting an end to it. I was seen right away at the emergency room. This is not a good sign. I couldn't speak. I was on the edge of fainting out, and all I wanted was an IV with a really strong painkiller. My heart rate was 185. Normal is 60. And I had a low-grade fever, they said. I honestly don't remember what my blood pressure was since I was so preoccupied with the awful agony. I was admitted to the hospital again. The CT scans revealed that I had paralytic ileus, a post-anesthesia problem in which my intestines had not awakened and were swollen. A second glance at my scan revealed that I also had a bloody belly. I was internally bleeding. I have no recollection of the days that followed. I was dying of illness. Doctors came and went. Nurses worked around the clock. Medical personnel came and went, and only family members visited. Sawyer was never far from my side. For me, pain was the only thing that existed. I couldn't eat or drink anything in case I needed to be hurried to surgery, and it also helped my intestines to wake up. I was instructed to walk around as much as possible. Every stride, every movement was agony, even after an injection of my prized medicine. My doctor discussed surgery to pinpoint the unknown bleeding spot, but another surgeon objected, owing to my other issue, at least for the time being. We had come to a halt. I was stable, albeit low. I was still being intensively watched. I received 2 blood transfusions, as well as numerous antibiotics. When my family was around me, they were fighting back tears. My husband went above our expectations in terms of strength and empathy. It was the most terrifying event that had ever happened to our family. Throughout it all, the only thing I could think about was the pain. I was in excruciating pain. Suffering was my world. Pain that I couldn't conceive any living thing ever having to endure. I couldn't sleep because I was so uncomfortable. When I was able to close my eyes for a few minutes at a time, I only dreamed of pain and dread, generally frightening myself awake. Except for one night when my eyes opened to find myself surrounded by white. There are no walls or floors here, just hazy white nothingness. I was standing tall and straight, something I hadn't been able to do since the operation and the discomfort. It was gone, much to my amazement. I was warm and cozy, even tranquil. I had long forgotten about these feelings. My body was no longer ill. I felt light and silky. I was dressed in a lovely, plain white gown. I felt fantastic. Anthony. I spotted him in the distance, in the mist. He was waiting for someone on a white bench. He stood and turned to face me as I approached. I was overjoyed to see my long-lost pal again. There was a peculiar formality about everything, as if time had frozen. He gave me his renowned smile and put his right hand on my left shoulder. We didn't say anything, but his gaze was fixed on my face. That's when I noticed it start to appear. A huge light shone behind Anthony and to my right. It was dim at first, but it grew brighter and stronger with time. It was the most magnificent thing I'd ever seen. Colors and feelings that no words can express. Glittering hues of golden blues and affection. It was brighter than the sun, but it didn't hurt my eyes to stare at it. Heavenly. I couldn't take my eyes off her. I experienced the same sensation as when you see someone you care about after being separated from them for an extended period of time. I felt pure, unconditional love in that light. Everything was there. It was all that was and will ever be. I desired to be a part of it. It was impossible not to want to rush after it, stroll towards it, and melt into it. I felt at home there. It was calling to me, expecting me. I returned my gaze to Anthony's, his hand resting on my shoulder. I was overcome with happiness and love. His reaction reinforced what I already suspected. That was the light, and Anthony was there to guide me through it. He was waiting to take me home. I remembered Sawyer all of a sudden. I looked to the left, underneath my feet. I could see my husband sleeping on the tiny fold-out couch in the hospital, next to my bed through the fogginess of the white floor. Fully clad, feet and arms drop over the sides. I had a longing for him. I wished I could go down there and lie beside him. assure him that everything will be fine. I wished I could be with him. It was as if I had responded to an underlying inquiry without saying anything. When I returned my gaze to Anthony, he grinned and gently squeezed my shoulder. My decision had been made without even a murmur leaving my mouth. I wasn't prepared to leave. My feet had become as heavy as concrete. I could only watch as Anthony walked toward the most magnificent light, which engulfed him and left me behind. The moment faded away as I fell backwards through the white emptiness. The ache returned when I opened my eyes again. The agony was excruciating. My body was so weak and feeble that all I could do was tolerate it. My IV drip's repetitive tones ricochet around the room. My hospital bed served as a reminder of where I was. Sawyer was stretched out on the tiny pull-out couch to the left. The next day and night, like the previous ones, focused on my pain. It was like a countdown to see how much I could bear as the pain faded. Mentally, I'd be clawing my way out of my skin, desperate to be free of the agony that had bound me. I was locked inside my shattered body. I'd be crying at the end of every 3 hours, praying for it to stop. I made every effort to put on a brave face. I'm going to grit my teeth and bear it. The cycle would restart from the beginning once the agony was infused into my IV, the metallic taste flooding my tongue. Sawyer may have longed to swap places with me, but I would never have agreed to it, not even theoretically. My physique was deteriorating. I was a skeleton with gray skin and a bloated belly full of blood. My eyes were glassy and lifeless. My hair was oily. I had IV bruises on my arms and several needle pricks from blood tests, sunken cheekbones, and cracked lips. I was frail and breaking down. Life is so fleeting. My miracle turning point came the night after my dream. I despised waking Sawyer up every hour to assist me in getting out of bed to use the potty. I decided to let him sleep and try to do it on my own, which I triumphantly did. When I eventually got back into bed, I noticed moisture under my legs. I reached under the sheets to check, depressed that incontinence had been bestowed upon me. When I lifted my hand, I was shocked to discover blood-soaked fingers. I found myself sitting in a pool of my own blood. It was practically oozing through the covers and spreading. The following 15 minutes flew by in a blur of controlled mayhem. Nurses, my husband, my mother, Tess, and so much blood. So much blood. It was actually pouring out of me like a faucet, and there were clots of it everywhere. I thought it was the end of my life. This was the end. The nurse informed us that after speaking with my doctor and checking my vitals, the doctor stated that this was the blood that had been sitting inside my tummy and was being evacuated vaginally through the internal stitches. The blood that my body was supposed to reabsorb was suddenly released. I was fine as long as my vitals stayed stable as they'd been. He'd be there soon to examine me. I passed almost 2 liters of blood and well over 800 cc's of fist-sized or larger blood clots, which the nurse described as my liver. This all transpired in less than 45 minutes. My room resembled a horror movie set. My pain was drastically reduced in that split second, as if by a miracle. I finally got some relief from the misery I'd been experiencing for nearly a week, but only at the cost of an unexpected bloodbath. Over the next 48 hours, my heart rate gradually decreased from the 140s to the 90s. My blood pressure improved. My hematocrit stayed stable, and my intestines began to function normally. I was finally permitted to begin liquefying, and Campbell's soup juice had never tasted so good. I was progressing. I was released from the hospital 2 nights following the bloodbath. My doctor provided me his personal phone number and told me to text him every few hours with my heart rate and blood pressure readings. Of course, I was scared that I'd suffered another internal bleed. He made himself available for any problems and frequently checked in on me. I was still in pain. However, this was the type of pain I was expecting. I was finally able to begin my much longer rehabilitation. I had another bleeding scare 2 weeks after returning home, which landed me back in the emergency hospital, but miraculously stopped. I just stayed in bed and slept for a month after that. I'm still in recovery mode. My wonderful family took care of my children, and my remaining friends kept an eye on me at all times. There was also Sawyer. I have no words for what he's done for me during this ordeal. I'm not sure what I would have done without them all. I've kept this recollection largely hidden for months, but it's been on my mind every day. The sheer beauty of it still astounds me. I had no genuine understanding of them prior to my NDE, or near-death experience. Of course, I'd heard of them, as had many of us, but I'd never given them any thought. They didn't matter to me, and I certainly didn't anticipate anything like this to happen to me. It wasn't a pre-existing notion, or anything my imagination could have conjured up. My subsequent study has only verified my experience. People all throughout the world have incredibly similar experiences and feelings. Some have perished, while others are on the verge of dying. I have no doubt that what occurred to me was genuine. This is not meant to be a sermon. I've always thought of myself as having a healthy balance of faith, spirituality, and science. I haven't changed my mind. Rather, I believe it has confirmed what I've always known in my heart and soul to be true. I've always thought that God is love. There's a higher energy out there that we're all connected to, and I've witnessed it. There's no other explanation. What I'm left with is the knowledge that there's a higher power. Any doubts I had regarding an afterlife or paradise have been dispelled. It does exist. I'm no longer afraid of death. I'm afraid of pain, but not of death. Death is the most beautiful thing you'll ever witness. I've stood on the brink of eternity and had the wonderful privilege of returning. I made that decision out of love for Sawyer. I'm crying even as I type this. I no longer wonder about the meaning of life. I'm more at ease than I've ever been. Although I know that suffering, selfishness, and brutality will always be part of this world, I also know that there's a world of love and light beyond this. There's a place of calm beyond our mortal body's comprehension, and it awaits me and you. Jesse S.